Good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful day so far. I got a good one for you today. So, I finally finished the Justin Trudeau Part 2 interview that I was going to finish before. This is the question and answer period that I didn't want to subject you guys earlier to. So, I know there's a lot of changes that happened recently. Trump delayed the tariffs until April, and I think that everything Justin Trudeau has said in this video is still valid, because if those tariffs go through, I mean, at this point in time, I do not think they will, because we'll have a new prime minister by then. But I think we should still go through this, because pretty much all of the liberals have the same views and same, they're pretty much Justin Trudeau 2.0. So, a quick plug first. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Also, there's a link down below to buy me a coffee, and if you want to drop $1 or something, that would be greatly appreciated, because all of that goes back to the channel. And other than that, let's get back to the video.
More progress on fentanyl. So my question to you is, do you have any conversation scheduled with Donald Trump in the coming days? Is that something maybe your successor should do? And do you really believe that this is about fentanyl, or is there something larger at play here?
I have offered to speak to Donald over the past number of days, and I expect to speak with him in the days to come. I'm always there to talk with him about the importance of working together to take on the world at this time. The facts show very clearly that in terms of taking action on fentanyl, we are doing everything that is necessary, and not just for the United States, for ourselves as well, as Canadians are suffering as well from the scourge that is illegal fentanyl. We have laid out extensive plans, actions, cooperations, including as recently as the past days in Washington, and they have always been very well received. And the numbers bear that out. I think in what President Trump said yesterday, that there is nothing Canada or Mexico can do to avoid these tariffs, underlines very clearly what I think a lot of us have suspected for a long time, that these tariffs are not specifically about fentanyl, even though that is the legal justification he must use to actually move forward with these tariffs.
Monsieur Trudeau, en français, à part l'allocution que vous avez eue
And right after this, Donald Trump came out and made a tweet and said that he had a big, long talk with Justin Trudeau. Said that they did talk about the bad F-word stuff. And that's coming across the borders of Canada and Mexico. I'll put the tweet up right here. He said that it wasn't good enough that Justin Trudeau couldn't mention when the Canadian election will be. Now, there is a reason for that, because it's not up to Justin Trudeau, it's up to whoever wins the Liberal election. But Justin Trudeau could have stepped down by now. And could have, or at least could have unprorogued Parliament. And Donald Trump also, that he realized that Justin Trudeau is trying to use this to stay in power. So I don't think that's what Trudeau is going to do. That would be an unprecedented thing. I think what the Liberals want to do with these tariffs is use it as a talking point to pretty much flood our media and everything with this one topic, so we lose focus on what the Conservatives are saying, and we lose focus on the problems that were originally in Canada. And you can kind of see that when you watched the Liberal debate, it was majority about Trump. When any liberals are asked like any questions now, it's all about Trump and the tariffs. Like nothing is being said about the housing crisis here in Canada. Nothing's said about the carbon tax anymore here in Canada. Nothing's said about the high taxes here in Canada, right? It's just all about these tariffs. And I think the liberals are loving and feeding off of that. And we saw that in the polls recently. Now, the conservatives are coming back and rising in the polls against the liberals, but after waiting a couple of days, I feel like that's the plan. That they are using the tariffs to kind of make their party look better.
This is the same day that the United States has announced it's suspending aid for Ukraine. The Kremlin just said that U.S. foreign policy now is in alignment with Russia. So how do you successfully, or your successor, successfully negotiate with a president who seems to regard his friends as his enemies and his enemies as his friends?
In this regards, Canada and Canadians are very clear. We know who our friends are. We know who our opponents are, and there is no question that Vladimir Putin and his attack not just on Ukraine, but on the rules-based international order, on the founding principles of the United Nations, is an opponent of Canada. I think the question that we all need to be watching closely is, what do the American people think? How do Americans feel about jettisoning one's friends and allies in favor of a country that has never wished Americans well and continues to act in ways that harm the global economy and specifically the American economy and American values and principles?
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Valérie.
Just because this question is stupid. So stupid. Just because Russia comes out and says, oh yeah, it looks like their decisions are aligning with Russians' decisions, it's like, that doesn't mean they are, and that doesn't mean the U.S. is pro-Russia in the Ukraine war. It just means there's a happenstance that this happens. Of course, when the U.S. says, oh, we're not going to provide more money or stuff like that to the Ukraine, Russia's going to come out and say that because they're probably happy that they'll have less weapons. I don't know. It just seems ridiculous that you'd blame or assume one country has
And businesses is that, first of all, there will be similar impacts on Americans losing their jobs, American families paying more for basic goods that they rely on at a time where times are tight everywhere. But our focus has to be on getting these tariffs lifted as quickly as possible. What can we do in the coming days is our focus to make sure that these tariffs don't last a second longer than necessary. So we will be looking at, including looking in the coming day at things we can do around adjusting EI to support people through this difficult time. But our priority has to be not on figuring out how to manage through these tariffs over the coming days and weeks and months, but on doing everything we can to get them lifted and put an end to this unjustified trade war that hurts American families and Canadian families.
On a l'impression que vous n'avez plus beaucoup.
Why can't we do both? Like, the federal government has to look at this and see that, hey, we can't keep on relying on the United States as this partner that's always going to be there. We got to make Canada more self-reliant, and we got to make Canada able to send its oil, its minerals, its food, its everything to all parts of the world and make it easy. Like, we send 80% of our oil to the United States. That is ridiculous. So they have to look at a way to manage these tariffs as well in the case that it lasts for months. Why can't our government do two things at once? It seems kind of crazy to me.
Coup de cartes dans votre jeu. Est-ce que de devancer la négociation de la renégociation
On pourrait entamer des choses ensemble. Devancer des négociations. I'm just trying to remember. What was that? Cosmac, that's right. I think in terms of what he wants, and I heard he talked about banking again this morning in a tweet, which doesn't make any sense because American banks, there's about 16 American banks currently active in Canada holding about $113 billion worth of assets in this country. So the American banks are alive and well and prospering in Canada. It's an example of not really being able to see what it is that he wants, because even the excuse that he's giving for these tariffs today of fentanyl is completely bogus, completely unjustified, completely false. So we actually have to fold back on the one thing he has said repeatedly, that what he wants is to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy, because that'll make it easier to annex us, is the second half of his thought. Now, first of all, that's never going to happen. We will never be the 51st state. But yeah, he can do damage to the Canadian economy, and he's started this morning. But he is rapidly going to find out, as American families are going to find out, that that's going to hurt people on both sides of the border. Americans will lose jobs. Americans will be paying more for groceries, for gas, for cars, for homes, because we have always done best when we work together. So we are, of course, open to starting negotiations on the customer review, but let us not fool ourselves about what he seems to be wanting. And I will admit, I have been holding out hope that these tariffs were just a clever negotiating ploy that would have the impact that they're having now without even bringing them in over the past weeks, as we've seen order books dry up for Canadian companies from American customers, as we've seen expansion plans in Canada put on hold, as we've seen people choosing to invest in the United States over the past weeks because of the threat of tariffs. But now that he's moved forward with tariffs, we're going to see the real impact of a trade war between our two countries. And that impact will be to hurt American families.
And Justin Trudeau just said the quiet part out loud. He said that, he was holding out hope that this was just a bargaining chip. The government didn't prepare. Our government didn't buckle down and figure out what they would do if it wasn't just a bargaining chip. They were just sitting there, crossing their fingers and hoping that, Donald Trump wouldn't do this, Donald Trump wouldn't do that. And then some of them, most likely, if you think like I do, were like, yay, this is a good way of getting all of our mistakes out of the news. This is a way to change all of the talking points and make us look good. It's diabolical, and the other part of it is stupid for not preparing for everything. I mean, yes, we did a lot on the border, which should have been done way before these tariff talks ever came in, but looking at it right now, I think that the Liberals are loving this. Or Liberal politicians are loving this.
Prime Minister Tonda McCharles with the Toronto Star. I hope you can be as specific as possible for a number of these points. Everybody's looking to what actually you're going to do. In your statement last night, you referenced non-tariff measures, and I want to know exactly what you're prepared to contemplate there. And given that your likely successors, both Carney and Poilievre, have said it should be dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs, that's on $600 billion worth of American imports. If you were to do that, is that on or off the table?
I will be sitting down, as I have every week for the past many, many weeks, with the premiers this afternoon to talk about our individual, combined and collective response to this. As we've put on the table, the federal government has $155 billion worth of tariffs that we can move forward with immediately and that we will be moving forward with both now and 21 days from now to give Canadian companies time to adjust their supply chains to not be overly impacted by this. But there are many other things that have been surfaced by different premiers in different approaches that we can look at. One, for example, is around purchasing and around suppliers and around contracts, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, with American companies. There are many different things that we've been looking at, and that conversation with the premiers this afternoon is going to be very, very important. But I can tell you what we have seen is Canadians across provinces and territories, across political lines, are united in knowing that this is a time to hit back hard and to demonstrate that a fight with Canada will have no winners. And the sooner we can get past this fight, back to working together to take on the world, as our two countries always have, the better we'll all be.
To what extent have you turned or gotten cooperation from any other allies to exact more pain on the U.S. to accelerate getting to a solution? And are you concerned that Mexico appears to be trying to do their own thing maybe next Sunday? Where are you with any guarantees you've got allies?
I've just spent quite a bit of time over these past couple of weeks meeting with European and international allies to talk about a number of different things, including standing up for the rules-based order by defending Ukraine, but also being there for each other in a more challenging and uncertain world. And I can tell you that every country is very, very aware that if the American government is willing to do this to their own closest ally, neighbor, and friend, everyone is vulnerable to a trade war. And our ability to work together thoughtfully and strategically to make sure we're supporting our citizens, we're doing things together in a more diversified way, is something that is on the mind of all of our allies.
And that is the truth, though, too, is probably every country is thinking, well, damn, if the U.S. is putting these amount of tariffs on Canada and Mexico, they're border countries, and the countries that are most friends with them, what are they going to do with us? That'll be a very interesting conversation that Trump will have to have with them, but I don't think Trump might just be like, well, there you go. Tariff on you too.
Reasonably quickly, but there's...
As we know, the Liberal Party is going to be picking a new leader over the weekend. But when is it going to be your last official day as Prime Minister?
That will be up to a conversation between the new leader and myself to figure out how long a transition is needed. It should happen reasonably quickly, but there's a lot of things to do in a transition like this, particularly at this complicated time in the world.
So this guy still, just like Trump said in his tweet, won't say when he's going to actually step down. I like, at least he said relatively quickly, but just give a date. Just be like, it'll take some time, but probably 10 days after, everything should be sorted and then I'll step down. Stop being weird about it, because it creates this cloud of will he, won't he actually step down around Canada. I don't know.
Une fois que le nouveau chef du Parti libéral sera...
Don't consent to that. On March 9th or March 10th, so it sounds like you'll probably still have some time remaining to put in some more actions on this. one of those things that you're considering going to be taxing oil, gas, and potash exports, even if premiers don't consent to that?
As I said, the most important thing we're facing, as I've said, the most important thing we can do is ensure that Canadians remain united. That's why whatever response, individually or collectively, we do across the country, we have to make sure that no single part of the country is carrying a greater burden or suffering any more than everyone else. This is going to be tough for all of us, but we need to be pulling and holding Canadians together every step of the way. And that's the conversation I'm going to be having with the premiers this afternoon in our now weekly meetings. There will be many different ideas we discuss, but the most important thing, more important than doing specific or effective pressure points on the United States, is keeping Canadians united together. As we go through the pain that these American tariffs will inflict on our economy, on our workplaces, on Canadian families, we will be able to say this is happening to us by the decisions of a different government. As American families suffer the impact of these tariffs, of this trade war with Canada, they will be saying this is happening because our own government is choosing to do it to us. That's a very different proposition. And the most important thing right now, more important than anything else, is for Canadians to remain united. And that's why all premiers will be focused on things that make sure Canadians don't get divided amongst ourselves. This is a time for us to pull together, because the Americans will be having very real and very challenging debates and discussions about these actions. There will be no debate in Canada about whether or not we should be pulling together and responding. Everyone is aligned on that, and protecting that is job one for the Canadian government and the Canadian Prime Minister.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau.
So where did all this patriotism and everything come from? Because to be particularly honest, this guy has been out to rip Canadians apart since he started. Let no one forget about the Emergency Act when he brought that forward. Hopefully nobody forgets what happened during the Great Cold when he divided Canadians between the vaxxed and unvaxxed. And recently he's been dividing Canadians between the poor and the rich. Well, and also let's not forget between the young and the old as well, because he's trying to put in that, what is it, capital gains tax increase. And they're saying equality for every generation. Yeah. Let's believe Trudeau when he starts saying that the Liberal government means to keep Canadians together and then us all friendly with each other.
Okay. We don't have anything against Americans. Canadians injustifié.
We will take one last question and follow up. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. Mackenzie Gray with Global. You mentioned the markets earlier. Someone who knows a thing about them, Warren Buffett, came out and said that these tariffs could be viewed as an act of war. Does the Canadian government believe these tariffs from Donald Trump is an act of war from the U.S.?
Canadians are not angry at the American people for this. We don't have anything against Americans. Americans are our neighbors, our friends, our partners. We do things together. We've done things together for decades and generations. This is a policy decision by the American government designed to go after the Canadian economy. This is a trade war, yes. But Canadians, Canadians are hurt. Canadians are angry. We're going to choose to not go on vacation in Florida or Old Orchard Beach or wherever. We're going to choose to try to buy Canadian products and forego bourbon and other classic American products. And yeah, we're probably going to keep booing the American anthem. But let me tell Americans, we're not booing you. We're not booing your teams. We're not booing your players. We're booing a policy that is designed to hurt us. And we're insulted. And we're angry. But we're Canadian, which means we're going to stand up for each other. We're going to fight. And we're going to win.
There are probably a lot of folks watching on TV today who've been laid.
I mean, that's great. That's great that our current prime minister is telling Canadians that they should boo the national anthem, not visit the United States, and forego American products. That's a great way to start mending talks with the United States. Man, this guy's such a doughhead.
Laid off, or they were told not to come into work today because of these tariffs. Can you explain to them why you've not announced any relief measures today to help those folks out?
As I've said,
I can tell them why. Is because that's additional spending, and the government has to put that through Parliament, and because it's prorogued, Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government can't approve anything. Well, no, the government can't approve anything. So, unfortunately, until there's an election, these people aren't going to get any help because our government wasn't prepared that these tariffs would actually go through.
our entire focus has been on preventing these tariffs from coming in, if there was at all a way, and it now looks like there was never a way we were going to be able to avoid these tariffs that the President was determined to do. And our focus now is going to be on making sure that they get lifted and that there is an end to this trade war as quickly as possible. But over the past month, we have been working on measures that if these tariffs last longer than a few hours or a few days, we be able to help Canadian citizens, Canadian workers, Canadian companies make it through this time. But let's also be clear, this is going to be tough. The American trade war is going to hurt the Canadian economy and is going to hurt all of us. What our government needs to make sure we're doing is try to make sure that nobody goes hungry and that everyone carries their share of this. And that's a hard thing to do, but that's where we're leaning in, both as a federal government and with provinces and territories, on responses to be there for Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Merci.
Well, that's awesome. That's Trudeau's stance on where we're at right now here in Canada with the tariffs. So let me know what you think down below. Do you think possibly the long-term outcome of this thing will be good for Canada, will make us more self-reliant? And also, let me know down below how the NAFTA agreements affected you when it first came in. Also, if you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and down below if you'd like to donate to the channel, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link where you can donate. And other than that, have a great day.